Angie and I are patrons of CCF in the UK, and we were thrilled when we had the chance to come here to London to speak on behalf of CCF and in support of Laurie's talk this evening at the Royal Institution here in London. And of course we realised that this was the perfect opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation, an audience with Laurie Marker, to find out how a lady with an interest in wine came all the way from America to try and save the cheetah in Namibia and beyond. I want you to listen to this. Laurie, how did somebody with a passion for wine in America end up in Namibia trying to save the cheetah?
Well, I first met the cheetah in 1973, and I had moved to Oregon from California, where I had been a winemaker and helped develop the Oregon wine industry, and went to a wildlife park that was just down the road from my vineyard and winery. And here we were in this very rural area where there was a lot of African wildlife. There were cheetahs, and they fascinated me. I ran their veterinary clinic in the nursery, and for 16 years, that's where I was based. And in the middle 70s, as we were breeding cheetahs, I was given an opportunity to go to Namibia, which was a weird place to go because it was sort of war-torn at that point in time, and taught this cheetah that I'd hand-raised how to hunt.
Right, and then of course when you got there, you realized that a lot of farmers and ranchers had a very anti-cheetah attitude. How did you go about changing that?
So when I moved into Namibia and started finding out why farmers were killing them, it was a very simple question. Was it because they were actually killing their livestock, or was it a perceived threat to their livestock problems? Also coming from a scientific side, instead of going to the farmer with a bleeding heart of, oh, you killed cheetahs, it was, I want to know, where, why, how? I want you to know more about the cheetah. Help me, if you catch a cheetah, let me take its blood, let me measure it. I'll tell you about its genetics. And they were just shocked at that. But my background growing up had been in farming. So I had a real connection, I think, with the farmers, and they appreciated that.
If you go in with empathy and actually try and understand their point of view and get them to see that you're not threatening them, but you actually want to try and bring change, which works for them and for the cheetahs, I can see how that could be successful.
I call it creative conservation, is to actually look and think about what people's problems are, and then find out if there's a solution so that the people and the cheetah can live in harmony together.
Do you think that there is a future for cheetah and people living together?
Well, our motto for the Cheetah Conservation Fund is we can live together. And it's about an integrated system. I believe that Namibia is famous, it will continue to be famous, to share with people that it's not an us or them. We can actually live together if we manage our livestock properly, and therefore you learn more.
So what I think you did was that you identified the way in which the farmers could be less proactive in just going out and targeting predators regardless. And of course one of the things you did was to bring, I think, Anatolian guarding dogs from Europe to Africa. Tell me about that.
These dogs are wonderful. We've helped develop the livestock guarding dog program now in South Africa, Botswana. We've had dogs come up into Kenya, into Tanzania, but predator people now worldwide have watched the work that we've done in Africa and are learning that they can actually protect predators, protect livestock, not just cheetahs, but all predators, watching the work that we've done now for so many years.
But now what about with the ranchers and the farmers on the bigger properties? I think you've also been trying to persuade them to sort of adopt better husbandry practices, haven't you, in terms of calving seasons and things like that?
What the farmers didn't really realize is that a female cow will, chase away not only cheetah, but can chase away leopard as well. But if there's only one cow, she can't do it on her own, but if there's multiple cows and they're all protecting the calf, there's a lot of synergy that goes into that. We've also used things like donkeys to protect, yes. And not lots of donkeys, one donkey, it grows up with the stock, but these calving corrals so that you bring them near a homestead, or you put your staff out in the bush, also protecting your calving areas. Areas where cheetahs travel through. As you know, cheetahs go to these marking trees, the play trees. Well, if you've got all of your calves giving birth in an area where there's play trees, the cheetahs are going to be there, and the leopards come to those trees as well. That understanding them that kind of movement pattern. So there's been a lot of thinking that we've helped the farmers do by having them know more about the movement of the cheetahs through radio telemetry, and the years of work that we've done just studying the movements and the behaviors of the cheetahs too.
I remember you telling me that you actually wanted the people who trapped these animals to take responsibility, to see if you couldn't sort of get them to maybe be a little bit more compassionate in that respect. I mean, just tell me about how things are working at CCF now.
Well, over the years now, we've worked on nearly 1,000 cheetahs. And out of that, about 20% of them had to come to our facility as orphaned animals, as something was wrong with them, if we could fix them up. Many of these animals then were able to go back out into the wild. And in the beginning, the farmers would say, no, we'll just kill them, or you just take them away. From that is the more we taught the farmers, then we'd say, let us tag it, let's release it with a collar, and then you can know what's going on. And as we started educating the farmers that way, and they started realizing how the movement of the cheetahs worked, they started joining us and saying, well, let's put them back out in the wild. Then from there it was like, stop catching them. Maybe that play tree where you've got your cage trap, maybe that'd be a great place to take tourists, and they could see what a movement area is. You could see tracks there, maybe some scat. So from that, we started then also working with the government on policies, where the government says now to farmers, you all know that you can live with these animals. You really shouldn't be catching them. There are still some orphans that get caught and need to be brought in. We do have a sanctuary. We've got about 40 animals there. Some of these animals have been very important to us to learn about reintroduction strategies, coming back kind of full circle, and that taking a wild animal and putting it out in the wild, it'll do great in an area that it comes from. But if you then start looking at reintroduction ideas, let us say, into a place like India or Uzbekistan, you have to have an animal that's going to eventually be able to be taught how to hunt appropriately. So we've developed techniques with some of these orphaned animals that have an instinct to be in the wild, but then you help them along through a rehabilitation process, and they start learning how to hunt and monitoring them, and they actually have done quite well.
Were the farmers right in thinking that the cheetahs were as much a threat to their livestock? Have you been able to show them that in fact it wasn't as bad as they thought?
So much of our research was going and working actively with the farmers on why they were catching and removing cheetahs, and most of it was a perceived threat to their livestock or their wild game. So game farmers are actually one of the biggest problems that we have. Game farmers, as you know, have big game fences, and they keep their animals inside of a fence. It's like candy in a candy store. The cheetah gets in there and it's wildlife. It's like, great, I can hunt this. So a lot of the work that we've done also is, looking at their scat and coming up with what prey that they were catching. And we're actually to be able to show the farmers that the cheetahs weren't catching much livestock. With the game farmers, though, it then starts, again, talking about, predators are supposed to be in that system, or use it for tourism, or have a conservancy and take your fences down. So I still think that the game farmers are our biggest problem. And as we look at the areas in South Africa has a lot of game farms that are small, they're fenced, and that's the biggest problem also for cheetahs. And it's a mentality still, or a mindset to think about free-ranging wildlife and the value of large landscapes. That's probably our biggest problem that we have, to start looking at long-term futures for the cheetah.
Is there change coming that might affect the cheetah, just in terms of land management?
Well, in Namibia is very committed to conservancies, wildlife, realizing also in an arid country that we've got climate change coming. With that, we're going to look at a change of our grazing lands, and trying to actually encourage farmers to be more involved in wildlife, but not game-fenced wildlife, to be looking at these conservancies where the animals can move. In an arid landscape, you have to have migration. The wildlife will move to where there's water, there's grazing land, and the grazing land is going to be affected by the droughts that are going to continually happen. So it is going to be a big process in thinking about that, as where the cheetah fits in, where other predators fit in. And I try to ask people to think about things further down the road, not just today, but where are we going to be in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years? How are we going to plan for where the world's going to be in 100 years from now? And I want 100 years from now to have cheetahs. And with that, that means we have to think very actively, using the knowledge we have, our research that we've put into place, working with policies and governments, farmers, economies. I mean, we have to actually figure it out. Are we going to have a place for the cheetah in the future?
Yeah. Now, every so often, every generation, we get dynamic women or men like yourself, like Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, Daphne Sheldrick, who come up with these remarkable programs to help save wildlife. My fear is always, where's the next generation coming from? And of course that must be one of your challenges, and I know education and mentoring youngsters in Namibia, I know you have an education center. Who comes next to keep these programs running?
That's always a very good question on, who is the next generation. And I don't think there's probably going to be just one of me. I think that I'm hopefully raising an army. With that, it's looking at not only the science side of it, but the political side. We train Namibian students, we train biologists and conservationists from throughout Cheetah Range countries. The young kids are going to take on different roles, and conservation isn't just about being a scientist. It's looking at land use practices. It's looking at consumer buying. And a lot of the consumer buying that we're looking at for the cheetahs and other predators in the world. So we've looked at developing a lot of programs that look at like predator-friendly beef or eco-labels, habitat. Really what I want to do is to develop a program that the Cheetah Conservation Fund can go out of business in the future. And that conservation isn't needed, that we've got people living on the land in our world who have an appreciation and a responsibility to manage our land in a nature-friendly way, and we're living our lives in that way. I think we're getting close to some of that by spreading the word more about it, but that's going to take a lot of education at a different level as well.
But I think you're right. I think that spark of the people who excite people's imagination by their personal stories and their courage and dedication then actually can create a framework. And we've seen this now with the cheetah, haven't we, with these regional programs that now people like yourself, Sarah Durant, are creating programs which governments from individual countries are going to implement. There's a whole system and infrastructure for conservation being put in place, so that is wonderful. Now, one of the things that I loved when I came to visit CCF was seeing, I don't know if it was a goat or a sheep, being lured up to a little feeding station so as it could be weighed and milked. And what was that about?
Well, we do milk our goats, and we now have developed a creamery, which is called Dancing Goat Creamery. And our goats are dancing because they're protected by livestock guarding dogs, and we're not killing predators. So everyone's living in harmony. What we've looked at is kind of a secondary income. So if people have their livestock out there, potentially they could do more with it if they could have it in good shape, healthy. It fits into our Future Farmer of Africa training program. So it's part of our training program as well to help share with the rural communities that it's not just having your livestock and you're going to eat it tomorrow, that if you have a few goats, which are not going to graze as much as one cow, and you can actually use it for protein and better health for yourselves and your families. So that's a different model that we've been working on. We need to have goats because we have livestock guarding dogs. And we breed dogs. We've been able to breed and place usually 4, 5 to 6 litters a year. We've placed over 500 dogs now with the farmers. And with that, we have to have livestock. So it's starting to look at, well, if you've got your livestock, keeping it the best it possibly can be, and then utilizing it for other alternatives as well.
What is the biggest stumbling block to you achieving what you would feel is a success in terms of your projects?
Well, for nearly 25 years now, we have developed, I think, very solid programs based on science, good knowledge. What we need to do is scale it up. We need big partners. We need people to be aware of the fact that this is an animal that we could save. It's an animal that's in humans' hands, and that in order to do that, scaling it up is going to mean we need to have more resources. And that means, having a car that doesn't break down. We've got, staff out doing school programs on a regular basis. You're traveling around working with farmers, having educated staff, having it a part of the mindset of the people in Africa. So it's not something that is not doable. The problem, I think, with conservation and the way people think about it is, oh, it's really nice, you're out there, saving that animal. And well, does it cost money? And the answer is yes. And that we need to be able to scale up our programs now. Not in 10 years. We're not going to have these animals in 10 years. We can make a difference now, but we need to scale up the work that we're doing.
This is the big cat that actually, if we let this one go, boy, we will really have slipped up badly.
It'll be just horrible to see the fastest land animal, the most amazing of the cats. All cats are so intelligent, but they help us think as well. And I think that what the cheetah has done is it's taken us out of a box thinking. That a box thinking, I say, is all the wildlife can be in the game reserves and all the people are going to do this. The cheetah has helped me obviously think about how to integrate people into wildlife. And I think our programs have told the world the fact that we can't be in a box anymore. For the cheetah to survive, we have to think about making the world a different place. And I think that's a lot of what CCF has done. And our philosophy is that we need to change. As you know, Africa is a continent that is growing in population numbers. And we're seeing the fear on that is the impact of what that human population growth is going to do in the next 25 years. Today, 50% of the African population is under 25 years of age. We need to train now, fast, furiously, train Africans to help manage their land, appreciate the wildlife that they've lived with. And I think that the cheetah is an animal that is leading us down the right path, and the fact that if it's going to survive, the world has to be different.
So there we have it. Well, certainly as one of the patrons of CCF, I have a feeling that with Laurie's support and the amazing work that the organization is doing, not just in Namibia, but throughout Africa, that we really have a solid foundation to think that we can actually ensure the survival of the cheetah in the wild. And of course, you can make a difference too by pledging your support to the Cheetah Conservation Fund, because the one thing that we do need is to just endlessly rope people in, young and old, so as they can contribute to helping the cheetah survive too. So we're asking for your help. Please do.